They thought they could strip me of my homeowner rights. They thought the fines, the threats, the intimidation would wear me down until I gave up the home I had worked my whole life for. But they underestimated me. Because when the HOA came after me with everything they had, I didn't just endure, I fought back. And in the end, it wasn't me who broke under the pressure. It was them. This isn't just a story about one homeowner against a board.
What is this?
It's a story about control,
letter?
about power, and about what happens when ordinary people refuse to be bullied. So the question is, what would you do if the very people who were supposed to protect your community turned against you? When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I had finally found peace. The houses were lined up neatly with manicured lawns and fresh paint that gleamed in the sunlight. In the evenings, the air smelled faintly of barbecue, kids' laughter drifted from one yard to another, and neighbors gave polite nods as they walked their dogs. It was a picture-perfect community, the kind of place you imagine raising a family or retiring in comfort or simply living without constant noise and chaos. My home wasn't the biggest or the fanciest, but it was mine. A modest two-story with a porch out front, a small garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs, and a backyard wide enough for my dog to run without hitting fences. It wasn't luxury. It was stability, something I hadn't had for years. The first few months were everything I had hoped for. Mornings were quiet, evenings calm. Mail arrived on time, trash pickup was consistent, and the neighborhood seemed orderly in a way that was comforting. There was, of course, the HOA. They welcomed me with a generic letter, introduced themselves as the guardians of community standards, and provided a handbook full of rules. At the time, it seemed harmless. I flipped through the booklet, saw guidelines about lawn care, fence heights, even curtain colors. Strict, yes, but I thought surely nobody actually enforces all this. I tucked the handbook away in a drawer and forgot about it. But rules are never just about the paper they're printed on. They're about who enforces them and why. And in this neighborhood, I was about to learn just how far those in power were willing to go. It started small. A notice slipped into my mailbox. Your grass appears slightly above acceptable length. I laughed when I read it. My grass wasn't long at all, barely more than an inch higher than my neighbor's. Still, the wording felt cold, more like a warning than a suggestion. I told myself it was nothing. That would be the last time. But I was wrong. That letter wasn't an isolated reminder. It was the first move in a much bigger game, a game where the board was my own property, and I had no idea how far it would go. The next few weeks brought more letters, each one sharper, colder, and more demanding than the last. Your trash bin was visible from the street for 12 hours beyond pickup time. Your garden exceeds the allowed number of visible plant varieties. Your dog's barking has generated complaints from neighbors. At first, I tried to comply. I tucked the trash bin behind the fence the moment pickup was over. I trimmed my plants down to an uninspired, lifeless patch. I even kept my dog inside more often, though he hardly barked more than any other dog on the block. But no matter what I did, the letters didn't stop. Then came the fines. $50 for the trash bin, $100 for the garden, $150 for noise violations. They stacked quickly, arriving faster than I could pay them. And with each fine came a threat. Failure to resolve these issues may result in a lien on your property. That's when I realized this wasn't just nitpicking. This was targeted harassment. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. At meetings, I tried to defend myself.
These violation letters are not just about rules. They're about fairness and respect for our community.
But the board sat in silence, faces like stone, while the president wielded his gavel like a weapon. Every time I spoke, he cut me off, twisting my words into evidence of non-compliance. Neighbors who once waved at me now whispered, unwilling to get involved. The isolation was suffocating. Every time I walked outside, I felt eyes on me, neighbors peeking through blinds, board members slowing their cars as they passed my house. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison where every move was monitored. One day I came home to find a notice taped to my door. Final warning: failure to bring your property into compliance will result in legal action. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just endure this anymore. If I kept playing defense, they would bury me in fines and threats until I had no choice but to sell. They wanted me gone. But I wasn't leaving. And if they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The board called for a special meeting. The agenda? My property. By then, the fines had piled into thousands of dollars. The board claimed my violations were ongoing, even when I had proof they weren't.
These violation letters are an abuse of power. We are not just tenants. We are a community.
They accused me of damaging community harmony by refusing to comply. I walked into that meeting with my heart pounding but my head clear. I wasn't just bringing words this time, I was bringing evidence.
With all this evidence, Daniel, we have a very strong case.
They find me too.
We need change.
I had kept every letter, every fine, every notice. I had taken photos of my yard, my garden, my dog, my trash bins. I had spoken with other homeowners and gathered their stories of harassment and intimidation. And most importantly, I had an attorney by my side. When they tried to silence me, I didn't stop speaking. When they waved their gavel, I placed my evidence on the table. When they threatened me with legal action, my attorney reminded them of the law and how badly they had been violating it. Then came the moment that changed everything. We presented proof of financial mismanagement, inflated invoices, missing receipts, and funds that had simply disappeared. The president's face went pale. The once smug board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The room, once filled with whispers, went silent. Neighbors stared, realizing for the first time that the rules they had been forced to obey weren't about order or community at all. They were about lining pockets. The gavel that had silenced so many now fell with no power. The board was cornered, and for the first time, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. The court case that followed exposed everything. The judge ordered an independent audit, and the results were damning. Years of corruption, misuse of funds, and abuse of power, all laid bare for everyone to see. The president resigned in disgrace. 2 board members followed. For the first time in years, the neighborhood had a chance to breathe. We elected new leadership, people who cared about fairness and transparency. Notices turned into conversations. Fines were replaced with cooperation. Slowly, the tension that had poisoned our community began to lift. My garden, once the symbol of my rebellion, became a source of pride for the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once avoided me now stopped to talk, some even apologizing for not speaking up sooner. We rebuilt not just trust, but community. But the greatest change was within me. I learned that power only works when people are too afraid to question it. I learned that silence feeds bullies. And I learned that one person's refusal to back down can shift an entire balance of power. Looking back, I wonder, what if I had sold my home? What if I had given in? What if I had let them win? But I didn't. I fought back. And that fight didn't just protect my home, it transformed my neighborhood. So the next time you see a rule that makes no sense or a leader who abuses their power, ask yourself, what if I fought back? Because home isn't about control or rules or fear. Home is about belonging. And that's something no HOA can ever take away.